Greetings, Black family, and welcome to On the Wake Up Radio. And you have entered the center. I am your host, DC Radical One, and I thank you all for joining me today for today's discussion. Shout out to Raw on the boards, and of course our wonderful producer, Cindy Ashby. You can check us out at onthewakeupradio.com. We are also on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes Podcast, Google, for me, on Instagram at DC Radical, the number 1. With radical information, if you will, flowing. You can donate $2, $5, 10, 20, 50, 100 to donate. You can donate at onthewakeupradio@gmail.com. I'm your host, DC Radical One, and we're going to talk about today a very controversial topic. We're going to talk about, are black men cowards, and why don't black people fight back? But before we do that, I have some personal business. The Pride movement had their first of their singles mixers last night. Singles mixer was it was very interesting. We had a different crowd than we normally have. People were excited and engaged. And the next singles mixer will be October 12th, 2019. For more information, you can email pride_DC@protonmail.com. Also, this Saturday, the 21st, at 6 p.m., myself, DC Radical One, will be doing a lecture presentation, Africa versus Everybody, and this community discussion that I am giving is free. So if you're in the DMV area, you want to come out, want to build with like-minded people, and you want to see another dynamic, spectacular presentation by yours truly, you definitely want to come out. You don't want to miss it. If you're not in the DMV area, there's a possibility that a segment of it may make it onto the internet. I can't guarantee that, but I'll see what I can do. Now, here's how we're going to go. I'm going to talk for about 20 to 25 minutes. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Then we're going to take phone calls. Give me these 20 minutes to set this topic up. And then we're going to open up the lines after the break, and you all can give your opinion. Now, you ask the question or say what black men aren't doing. And it's a reasonable question to ask, especially in the time of Obama, where the murders of black people, and especially murders of black, especially the murders of straight black men who had families, were being shown publicly, and those men were being publicly executed by police. Now, I mean, really, I think it started with the Trayvon Martin murder. And that was such an outrageous murder because unlike the ones that the Trayvon Martin murder, he was a murdered private citizen. And the person was brought in and taken to trial. And that person, a private citizen again, with no authority other than the authority of his DNA and his skin, got away with murdering a teenage boy for no reason. A teenage boy who had on a hoodie, had went to the store and was coming back. His father owned a home. I think we kind of underestimate how that opened up the floodgates. Because if you cannot try and convict a private citizen for murdering someone who's doing nothing with a so-called black president who is really a mulatto who had a white mother and grew up around white and Asian people, doing nothing but saying he could have been my son and shedding a fake tear. But doing that, I believe, was the signal to the establishment that is now open season on black people in America. Who's not black but a mulatto, and if we know our history, we read Chancellor Williams' Destruction of Black Civilization, we understand that whenever you put that gave the permission for the open murder of black. After that, we saw a litany of murders. So many I can't even name. Sandra Bland. Her murder just wasn't as public. So now there's the sisters involved. There was a sister in Chicago. There was the brother down in North Carolina. There was Alton Sterling, I believe, in Louisiana. There aren't black men doing anything. But before we say that, we have to say that Micah Xavier Johnson, trained by the United States military to seek out and snuff out terrorists, sought out the terrorists that he saw who had infiltrated law enforcement and were wearing police uniforms and neutralized them as he's trained to do. So then we have Cosmo Septepenra, who saw Micah Xavier Johnson's example, also trained by the United States military. All these are, this is where the terrorists are. I shall take my training and go forth. Because I've been trained to neutralize terrorists. The terrorists are wearing the police uniform. And so we cannot say that no black people or no black men are doing anything. The most interesting thing is that the most crucial time period in the second most crucial time period, I believe, in American history, and the most crucial time period in the history of black people here in America was in the 1950s to the 90s. They tell us about Martin Luther King. Occasionally they'll mention Malcolm X. Non-violent social change. That's the legacy of Martin Luther King. Non-violent social change. Now here's the question. Is that the truth of what took place, or have we been bamboozled? What really happened? Taking a stand and defending the people. We can go back to people like Mark Essex in New Orleans, who also took a stand, I believe, in 1973, and decided he wanted to neutralize all four, Cosmo Septepenra and Micah Xavier. We go all the way back to the Garvey era. One of the things that we've seen is throughout the times, we had brothers who were World War I veterans, who joined the Garvey movement. And in the South, some of these brothers were known for serving justice and showing, as I believe Mr. Garvey said, we're a new Negro. A Negro that's not scared. And so this is history, again, that they don't talk about. And so if you're defending black people from them by armed struggle, you're neutralizing terrorists. We never hear that story. But then when we come up into the 50s, we have veterans from Korean War, and then later on veterans from the Vietnam War. And these men would come back to the same conditions that they left from, and coming back to disrespect and degradation here. And so many of the movements and organizations we will find these men in the midst of them. One of the key people we have to look at Robert F. Williams. He was also part of the NAACP in Monroe, North Carolina. And then they became an issue where black women were being disrespected, beaten, and raped by white men on the regular. The sisters in the community asked him, all right, Robert, what are you going to do now? And this became the impetus for Robert F. Williams getting other brothers in the community, some of them veterans, and deciding to defend themselves against these types of attacks and defend the sisters, the black women, against these type of attacks. And then Robert F. Williams would go on to write his book, Negroes with Guns. And his book, Negroes with Guns, became influential. It influenced people like Huey P. Newton of the Black Panther Party. And so this was in the 50s that Robert F. Williams began. And, of course, it's interesting to note that Martin Luther King spoke against Robert F. Williams, even though Robert F. Williams took up arms because that was the only methodology he could use to defend black women. And yet King, Martin Luther King, that they tell us to worship, that Martin Luther King criticized Robert F. Williams. But there's another story behind that. That's something we're not going to get into today. Now, we also have brothers in the South, the deacons. It's either deacons of defense or deacons for defense. I always mess that up. In Mississippi and Louisiana, you hear about the ones in Louisiana, you don't hear about the ones in Mississippi. And they would arm themselves. And some of these people were armed and defending the peaceful marches that were going on in the South. The marches were largely peaceful because brothers there were armed and organized to defend the people. I want you to remember that organizational part because that's key to what we're going to talk about today. And so the Deacons of Defense, Robert F. Williams, and when Malcolm X left the Nation of Islam, he was organizing brothers to defend, they were going to defend civil rights workers in the South. He sent a telegram to Martin Luther King to let him know. That's a little bit of history people don't realize because that time period after Malcolm left the nation, traveled overseas and came back, it was so small, there's so many things going on, that little snippet of history gets lost. And so we see before the Black Panther Party even came into existence in 1966, October 1966, the previous generation had engaged in armed self-defense. And so now that brings us up to October 66 with Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale forming the Black Panther Party for self-defense. And then they were the ones who, because what was in the South, really wasn't the law, even though it was law enforcement, but they weren't committing their crimes as law enforcement. In the West and the North, they were committing their crimes as law enforcement. Because what you had, especially in Los Angeles and the West Coast, Oakland and that whole West Coast area, you had Southern Louisiana whites and Mississippi whites had literally followed the Southern blacks that had came out from Louisiana and Mississippi and Texas out to L.A. in that area. And then the blacks that came in, the black people, the Africans, the factory stayed on building other things. The black people came for those jobs. The the whites came later, probably half a generation later or so, and became the police. And so that West Coast hub became an area with rampant police brutality because you had the Southern whites that had moved there, and they had that same Southern mentality, except now they had a badge and a uniform and a gun. And so Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale formed the Black Panther Party and decided we're going to police the police. And because of what they did, and it became captured on TV, that news coverage caused an explosion of Panther chapters in the next couple of years. And so, but the most important part of all of that, of all these movements that I've mentioned, part of all these movements is this is a key component of what we're going to discuss. But just remember, all of these movements were organized. So now we're going to move up, as we move up until the 60s, where after the murder of Martin Luther King, and even before, and after the murder, and open warfare between the Panthers and the police. Now, of course, we studied that the response to what was taking place with the riots and the things that were going on, there were two responses. There was a public response and a private response. The public response was the Kerner Commission, to study and see what's going on, in essence, why are black people mad and what can we do about it. One commission concluded in their study is that the impetus for the uprising of black people was the young black male. We have to understand, and we have to understand. Hippie Newton and Bobby Seale were college age. When people like Erica and John Huggins came from, I believe they came from New Haven, Connecticut, out to California. These were young people. The only people really in their maybe their late 20s, early 30s, man, I forget the dude's name, the one they called a Rage, Eldridge and Kathleen Cleaver. They were like elders amongst them. Many of the Panthers were 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Across the country. So young people were coming together, organized, and resisting tyranny and oppression. But the key with all these things, going all the way back to Garvey, moving all the way forward to the Panthers, and we're going to move a little bit more forward before we take this break. I got to get all this history out before we take the break. The key to all of this was organization. What was the second key to all this? The second key to all of this is all of this organized, armed resistance, armed struggle against the system, the United States government, and the racist power structure, as they used to say. All of this happened when? Primarily before the passing of and the institution of integration. And that's a key part of what we're going to talk about. And so, again, I talked about the public and private responses from the government. One of the private responses was the counterintelligence program of J. Edgar Hoover. And the counterintelligence program of J. Edgar Hoover basically set out to neutralize any black leader that white people didn't control. And as J. Edgar Hoover said, to prevent the rise of the black messiah. And I've always said this. I've said this for a while. Black people don't understand. White people believe in the black messiah more than black people. I'm going to say that again. White people believe in the black messiah more than black people. They understand each generation that's born, a segment of that generation is going to resist the programming, regardless of what's going on. And so their job is to look for that person, see who it could be, and try to neutralize him before he can organize a movement that outlasts him and continues on. Who's talking, who's not, who's figured out things they're doing, who isn't, who's organizing and not just talking, who has the ear of the people, who can influence people. They're doing this. That's what all the surveillance is for. That's why you have the advanced cell phone technology. You don't go anywhere without your phone, which means you can always be tracked. And so all these things have been put in place not for the reasons we think, but to what? Prevent the rise of the Black Messiah. The counterintelligence program may have been ended in name, has never changed. The technology has upgraded to the point where they don't even have to use the old tactics they use. So now, if we go into the 60s and we see the open attack on the Black Panther Party, we see the Black Liberation Army, Republic of New Africa, and these other organizations and groups, we see a constant struggle back and forth throughout the remainder of the 60s into the early 70s. But again, what did the Kerner Commission report say? Who is the impetus of the resistance? The young black male. So then what do we begin to see in places like New York? The first chemical warfare of the modern era, heroin. Now think about this. We know about Frank Lucas, who was an understudy of Bumpy Johnson. He begins importing pure heroin from Asia in U.S. Army, according to the story, in the coffins of dead U.S. soldiers. So the story is he's using the United States government to import pure heroin into America, into New York City. And I'm sure it spread out to other cities, black cities. And the people who were most affected by it were young black men. So we are to believe that the United States government, and they're sticking to it. So now, as the young black people who are the core of the revolution, as that takes place, and you have the constant attacks and assault on black leadership, where Robert F. Williams has to leave the country, Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale getting locked up and tried at different times. And you have them try to pit black groups against black groups. As that goes on, Malcolm X is already dead, and then you come into the early 70s, Elijah Muhammad, he's dead in 75, and then that organization is taken over, and all of the militancy and the pro-blackness is slowly streamed out of that. When you get to the late 70s, you enter a period where there are virtually no remaining strong, militant, male, testosterone-fueled movements left in the black community. At the same time, you do have more people being filtered into the political arena, and you have more black politicians and more black business people. So there's a black upper class that was kind of on the outside. It was above black people but below white people. It's starting to move up into a higher echelon amongst white people, taking over cities, major cities, D.C., New York, Detroit, Los Angeles, black mayors. But at the same time, the economic infrastructure of these places are being hollowed out so that you're not getting a type of economic investment within those cities that are being controlled politically by black people. So not only do you have the white flight of the people, but you have the white flight of the money. And so then you have the rise of the suburbs that surround these cities. And so now when you get into the early 80s, on militant organizations, and in the 80s you have the rise of the Nation of Islam, the second iteration, filtering young, strong black men into that organization. But the Nation of Islam has never been an organization centered around religious organization first. And so they became one of the strongest organizations. And so you have a gap and a void in that type of strong militant leadership and that type of strong organization. But then what takes place, just in case black people are thinking about anything like that, chemical warfare, and that chemical warfare is known as crack. So then with the crack also comes the guns. And the crack gets fueled into conflict between young black males in different areas of the city in different neighborhoods. And instead of fighting the power structure, the young black males of the 80s and early 90s are fighting who? Themselves. And so now you get to the point where you look at it and you ask, oh, there's over 1.5 million missing black men. And when they get out of jail, they're 40 years old. And they have no skills because they went in jail as a drug dealer. That's what the strong, militant, high testosterone having men, many of them, got caught. And so now we have a break in the strong, militant, aggressive black manhood against white authority. We have a break right there. It's spreading to other inner cities around the country called hip-hop. Of hip-hop in the different neighborhoods in New York through music and dance. Eventually, with the rise of police after that, the European wages a counteroffensive in the form of NWA, which popularizes the negative things, negative culture, negative behaviors. If you are talking about certain things, people like Wise Intelligent have talked about this, the hip-hop artists from Poor Righteous Teachers, like Kim Shabazz, King Son, and the list goes on. Paris, the Black Panther hip-hop, Cam, K-A-M, West Coast Cam, fading away, slowly being removed, and then everything becomes either you're a West Coast gangster or you're an East Coast player. Strong black male leadership. Ending in 2001 with Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad. He lost Dr. John Henry Clark. We lost Amos Wilson. We lost Ishaka Musa Barashango. Strong brothers who we were losing. So now, if we look at that and we follow the timeline, we've been listening to dudes talk about call black women B's and H's, talk about selling drugs, and talk about killing each other. And we run around calling ourselves the N-word for 25 years. Because psychologically, the word is degrading. And so when you use it, you're degrading the people and you're degrading yourself. So you don't even believe in yourself to be able to organize and do anything about it. It's your family. When we look at each other as family, what happens? But if it's a B, you don't care. See the psychology? If somebody does something to your brother, and so we have to look at these things and understand. We've been psychologically conditioned right back through the media and the hip hop, so that we don't even see each other as brothers and sisters. So when something happened, nobody, and all of the people I talked about before, were organized. As I always say, I've been saying this for years. Evil is organized. And bees. You can organize black men and black women. You can organize brothers and sisters, but you can't organize ends and bees. So why are we fighting back? Now the other question is, are black men cowards? I've seen brothers have shootouts in broad daylight. We become cowards. I've seen one walk in Southeast, a white female, and clear out the block. I couldn't believe it. I was looking there. I'm like, where's everybody going? I'm like, going nowhere. Cowards against our enemies. We have to accept that fact. The majority of us are cowards against our enemies. Understand the psychology, again, trained to kill ourselves, trained to fear our enemies. I just had to get that out. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a 5-minute break. If anybody wants to call in, your time to call in is during this 5-minute break. We're going to take calls, and we're going to go till about 5:30. So right now, we'll be back after this break.
You're listening to On the Wake Up Radio, and now an announcement by Maxine. Contact her at maxlaw5948@gmail.com. That's MAXLAW5948@gmail.com. Enjoy.
Warning! Unfortunately, new information has come to light. All I could say is, I'm so sorry. It was brought to my attention that there are many problems being reported from people taking our nutrigenomic products. So, since I've plastered your newsfeed with the information I have, I feel it's only fair I report the problems. You may want to work out, clean the house, work in your garden, play with your children, and stay up past 10 p.m. because you have that much energy. You may have to throw out your alarm clock with the snooze button because you will wake up feeling refreshed and ready to start your day every morning. You may lose your relationship with fizzy drinks and chocolate bars because you just won't feel the same way about them anymore. You may have to answer a lot of questions like, wow, you look great. What are you doing? Or, how can I feel as good as you? Because people will notice the difference it's made. You may have to convince people who think you're lying about your age because healthy makes you look younger. If you do not have any of these problems, please contact me as soon as possible.
Again, shout out to Raw on the boards and our wonderful producer, Cindy Ashby. SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and now on iHeartRadio at onthewakeupradio.com. And I am DC Radical 1. Find me on Instagram at DC Radical, the number 1. And quickly, we have a call.
Hello. Let's see. So this is a very interesting topic, and it's a very difficult topic because,
before you get started, can you state your name and where you're from?
Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now. Right.
Okay. I'm Simone. Oh, I would have to say, with the topic on men being cowards, I mean, I think that men, but there are some men who are cowards. Certain topics that they become cowards, like especially when it's dealing with some type of popularity, I guess you could say, they become cowards after that. Because it seems as though more for black people, and they're completely for the black woman, and then once they get all the recognition and all the love that they need, they become cowards and they stop preaching on what they've already taught everybody, and they kind of just
at status level.
Yes,
then
certain status level. It's just becoming like, I don't want to cuss, but they pretty much become like the white person's slave. Like, they fought so hard to get out of enslavement just to go back the moment that the pressure gets put on them. So I feel like that's how some men become cowards.
So can I ask a question then?
Yes.
You're saying that people, they fight, they're about certain things, they reach a certain status, and then the pressure comes on them, and then they retreat. Now,
yes.
if that's what you're saying, is it not incumbent on the community and their followers to support that person?
Oh, yeah.
So what they'll do now is they'll attack the person, then they attack them economically.
Yeah.
And so then, we still live in a capitalist society. The person still got to pay bills. The question becomes, as the community, are we going to support them and say, oh, he's on it, he's under attack, we're going to support him and keep him going? Now, at that point, the choice is his. If he retreats, then the people should retreat their support. But if he continues, I believe it's incumbent on the community to support him. Now, do you agree with that or disagree with that?
Oh, I agree with that. Because I feel like the people that you give knowledge to and your employees, this is going to happen. Like, for example, Irritated Genie. What's happening with him now? there seems to be a lot of people that are just like backing down. And it's kind of like, okay, well then, how do you expect to have all these leaders times when they're really going through something? I mean, Irritated Genie hasn't changed at all, but the problem is that it's not necessarily him and what he's going through. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's a very interesting and pertinent example. Because, as I said, part of COINTELPRO is, you understand COINTELPRO, I mean, we shouldn't be involved in those things. But I just want to put that out there to what you're saying. But
yes.
Go ahead, sister. I'll give you a couple more minutes. The line is kind of breaking up, so I'm going to see if we can work.
We also have people like Tariq Nasheed, who was for black people. He did all these hidden colors, but like at the same time, he's not for black people, but that they should date multi-race women. Like, that's not going to help the community. Like, how do you preach?
Not to cut you off, but I'll say this. You have to look at his home life. Simone, thank you again. Were you finished? Okay. I cannot hear you. So, because I can't hear you, and we're having some type of technical issue, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for calling in. Thank you for your contribution. Straight Black Friday. So, brothers and sisters, right now we are having some type of technical issue. Hopefully we get the technical issue worked out and we can continue the show. If we cannot get the technical issue worked out where I can hear the callers, then we will just end the show rather than me trying to figure out what they're saying, them trying to figure out what I'm saying, and having discord in the communication. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this announcement again, very quickly. Again, this Saturday, 6 p.m., 21st Century African Vanguard Series, myself, DC Radical One, doing a lecture presentation at Everlasting Life, 9185 Central Avenue, Capitol Heights, Maryland, 20743. It's Africa versus everybody. You want to be there if you can. You want to see this. It's going to be dynamic. It's going to be fantastic. Also, again, the singles mixer, October 12th, 2019, 7 p.m., same place, Everlasting Life Cafe. Again, you do not want to miss it. And so, because we're having technical issues, I'm going to end our show at the regular time. Again, thank you all to the callers. I apologize for our technical issues. Apologize for the people that weren't able to call in. But because I cannot hear you clearly, we cannot have proper dialogue, and I don't want to do anything that's shoddy and unprofessional. So, again, thank you all for supporting me. Thank you all for supporting On the Wake Up Radio. Again, if you want to donate to On the Wake Up Radio, you can donate at PayPal at onthewakeupradio@gmail.com. Also, again, if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Instagram at DC Radical, the number 1 on Instagram. And last but not least, if you would like to donate to myself personally, so I continue to do my research, buy my books, go to libraries, and eventually begin to travel and take this radio show and the lecture show on the road, you can donate at $DC Radical, the number 1. The choice is yours. And with that, brothers and sisters, I'm going to say Abibi for Hodie, which means African liberation, and straight Black pride. Again, I'll see you next week.
Imperial Media Collective.
Cindy Ashby Production.
On the Wake Up